Good evening, folks. This is an impromptu live stream here by your boy Nicky Stees. I was thinking I wasn't even planning on going live tonight at all. Nah. But something hit me. After the shocking news that the New York Knicks are parting ways with Tom Thibodeau, their head coach, I had to come on here and talk about it. And I did a YouTube short earlier, but now that I've had some more time to think about it, I had to say something because this is just ludicrous to me. All these different NBA teams feeling the need to fire coaches at random times that don't make any sense whatsoever, folks. I'm telling you, it's just mind-boggling to me. You're talking about a Tom Thibodeau, in his case, was fresh off the Knicks' best run in 25 years, making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, the first time in 2.5 decades. You saw the team progressively get better through Thibodeau's run, and he was a key contributor to that rebuild. And now, after a conference finals appearance, you fire the guy? Now, understand something of sometimes in sports, hey, a coach can only be with the organization so long. Eventually, after a while, you got to cut them loose if they're not producing. But you're talking about a Tom Thibodeau, whose Knicks team was increasingly getting better over the past 3 years. And now, after a conference finals appearance, they fire the guy? What sense does that make? I'm really trying to figure this out. Like in certain situations, using a few historical examples, I understand. I understand in the case of the Boston Celtics with Doc Rivers. They did win a championship a few years earlier, but they had been bounced in the playoffs several times since. And you kind of knew that in the case of the Knicks, in the case of the Celtics, he knew Doc Rivers had reached his peak as their head coach. So it was time to move on and part ways. So I get in that case. Or I get in those cases, I get in the case certain players like that. But then you're talking about here, you're dealing with a Tom Thibodeau who made this Knicks team better. They made the conference finals. Before that, they were the second round. Better here with Jalen Brunson as the star leading the way. Rebuilt. In 5 seasons there, 4 of the 5 seasons, they made the playoffs. And this is the closest you got to a finals run. Now you fire the guy who got you the closest to a finals. You've been the minus 2,000 in this century. Does that make... And it's not just the Tom Thibodeau. It's just all across the NBA. This is ridiculous. These ridiculous firings that just... no sense. It wasn't just that, but then you also talk about another example. You got Mike Malone for the Denver Nuggets. Now, 2 years ago, the Denver Nuggets, they won the NBA Finals. Right? Remember that. Mike Malone led the way for the NBA Finals win. They come back. All right. Last year, they fall short in the second round of the Timberwolves. But then as they're getting in playoff contention, closer to the edge of the playoffs, they suddenly decide to fire their head coach 2 years after winning a championship. Or remember Adrian Griffin last season? The Milwaukee Bucks were 30-13. 30-13 with Adrian Griffin as their head coach. And it looked like everything was going well for them. And then they all of a sudden decide to fire Adrian Griffin in favor of Doc Rivers. And look what happened the rest of the way. Their season fell apart. They got bounced in the opening round by the Indiana Pacers. Came back with Doc Rivers in 2025. And what happened again? The same thing. But Adrian Griffin was leading this team. 43 games, 30 wins. And they fired the guy. Make sense of that. And this has been going on for years. And I feel it correlates to the greedy mentality of NBA owners in terms of ego and desperately wanting to win now. They're so desperately to win a championship and so impatient about it. That leads to teams like the New York Knicks firing Tom Thibodeau. You know, we all know that the Knicks, that Dolan's a shitty owner. We all know that. And we proved it again today with the decision to fire the guy that helped lead a team to a conference finals run for the first time in 25 years. Try to make sense of that. And then we also got the Taylor Jenkins firing from the Memphis Grizzlies during the season. Now, in that case, I understand a little bit more. Jenkins had been there for a while, but they struggled to win big games. At the same time, I felt the timing was kind of odd. And another example just struck me. Speaking of the Milwaukee Bucks, let's go back a few years ago. Remember the Bucks won it all in 2021 with Coach Bud. Then, after 2 straight playoff exits, the Bucks got greedy and impatient, decided to fire Coach Bud despite winning a championship 2 years earlier. Only to follow that up by bringing Adrian Griffin in. And what do? Fire him 43 games in with 30 wins. Yeah, because that makes a lot of sense, right? Now, I heard with the Adrian Griffin situation, it was part of players' conflict. But we see that's another problem, too, is the players' conflicts. It most notably started with LeBron James, particularly his second run with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, look, I tried to defend LeBron James against irrational haters, and I'll continue to do so. However, when it comes to LeBron James' pull, his second go with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and his current run with the Lakers, I'm going to have to rant about it. Because I feel that this whole bowing down to players' wants, kind of similar to what happened with Adrian Griffin getting fired in Milwaukee, it was kind of influenced by LeBron James. Remember Tyronn Lue, right? They won a championship. 2016, Lue was the coach. 2017, 2018 wasn't going so hot. And what happened? Fired. Now look at the Lakers. Oh boy, look at the Lakers' current run with LeBron James. And head coach is not working out. Frank Vogel. They win a championship with the guy. 2 years later, gone. Darvin Ham. Last 2 years. Bounced by the Denver Nuggets twice. Gone. And now JJ Redick has been there for a season. But don't be surprised. LeBron James comes back next year and JJ Redick gets shown the door. Especially after Mike Malone was fired. I don't see how any head coach could be safe in the NBA. No matter what you've done, you could be fired at any minute now. My thumbnail. Now that thumbnail right there, unfortunately I couldn't get the full picture in there, but the picture was an illustration of over the past decade, of head coaches that won championships and were fired within 2 to 3 years or so after winning a championship. Coach Budman with the Milwaukee Bucks. Like I said, Tyronn Lue with the Cavs. And then you also had, Frank Vogel with the Lakers. Now, in some cases, some of these coaches did see their team fall off and regress. In some cases. But also in some cases, you could point this to players meddling around in affairs. Like you see with LeBron James, perfect example. How many different coaches has LeBron James, to some degree, had an influence on getting fired? And I feel like this has played a significant role in the continuation of this trend with other organizations. So to some degree, I'll say it, you have LeBron James. His power play moves the blame for it, for the negative effect it's having on the league. Now, on to the negative effect itself and why it's bad that they're doing this. You take a situation like the New York Knicks. Now, we don't know who their next head coach is going to be. Maybe Mike Malone takes the opening, guy who's won a championship before. And that would make some sense. But first off, we don't even know what's going to happen. It's been less than 12 hours, let alone 24 hours after the Knicks showed their coach the door. We have no idea what they got planned yet. And then furthermore, there's no guarantee that another head coach can duplicate the same success with the same core. There's no guarantee that if the Knicks were to bring in a Mike Malone or find someone else, that they'll have the same level of success with those players that Tom Thibodeau had. We saw a perfect example. Adrian Griffin getting axed to Doc Rivers. The Bucks were playing better, winning more games with Adrian Griffin than they were Doc Rivers. Adrian Griffin, for that short period of time he was the coach of the Bucks, the team was playing better than they were with Doc Rivers. Ultimately, Rivers ended up being a downgrade. When you look at how the season ended, they were about 500-ish the rest of the way that 23-24 season for the time Doc was there. Got bounced in the opening round. They had something similar happen this time around, getting bounced in the opening round by the same team. And then you look at, you can look at that. You see Darvin Ham going from Frank Vogel, won a championship to the Lakers, to Darvin Ham. Did Darvin Ham do anything to really get the Lakers back to that prominent point? If anything, you know what I could blame for that? The Lakers trading some of the key core pieces that won that championship the summer afterward to get Russell Westbrook, who didn't pan out with them. So maybe looking back on it now, yeah, maybe Frank Vogel wouldn't have panned out in the long term. But to me, instead of blaming Vogel, instead of blaming the coach for the fact that LeBron James tried to push management to get Russell Westbrook, and don't get me wrong, management plays a role for signing off on it for sure. Both LeBron and management who signed off on the Westbrook trade play a role in that. But you could also blame the player that had an influence on the office's decision to make the trade for the fact it didn't work out, that it set the team back from where they were. But guess what? Frank Vogel got the blame, bringing Darvin Ham. Then finally, midway through the 22-23 season, they realized, oh, this isn't working. They accepted the fact they had to get rid of Russell Westbrook. They mixed some younger guys and veterans together, made a run to the conference finals. But the point being is, I look at that more as talent than it was Vogel falling off as the coach in hindsight. And then look at Coach Bud with the Milwaukee Bucks. Yes, the team did not get back to the promised land, but I felt Coach Bud would have at least been worth another year or so with the Bucks to see what he could do. But you see this trend right here, that sometimes they fire all these coaches get fired, and it doesn't really do anything to get teams to the next level. Did firing Frank Vogel help get the Lakers back to championship contention? No. Did the Milwaukee Bucks firing Coach Bud get them back to championship contention? No. Now, in the one that does make sense was Nick Nurse getting fired from the Toronto Raptors. To be fair, he won a championship in 2019. He got fired in 2023. They had been struggling to get back to that level for a handful of years. They had regressed. They had 3 to 4 straight seasons. They couldn't recapture the magic. And that final season there, the team was awful, so they just decided to cut Nick Nurse loose. Now, looking back on it, seeing what's happened with Nick Nurse as a Sixers head coach, I don't blame the Raptors in hindsight. I'll defend the Raptors on that one. To be fair, they didn't fire him the year after a championship run. They gave him a few more years to try to repeat his effort, and then when they saw the team regressing, then they let him go. That one makes sense. However, but like I said, in most of these cases where teams fire a head coach that's doing good, it doesn't help them take that next step. I already used the Milwaukee Bucks, Adrian Griffin, Doc Rivers example. Ties right into my point. So the point being is, usually when this does end up happening, it's proven to backfire. These coaching carousels backfire on teams. And you saw with the Phoenix Suns going through 3 head coaches recently. They got rid of Monty Williams. Who they bring in after Monty Williams? Was it Vogel, I think? They gave him 1 season. They weren't happy with the results, and they cut him loose. And then they bring in Coach Bud, and they cut him loose after a season. Now, I get that this year, 24-25 Phoenix Suns drastically under-delivered, not even making the play-in. I get that. Then again, I could also kind of contribute to the front office as well, allowing some of their core pieces from that run in 2021 to leave, such as DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges. You know, while they weren't the main guys, they were still guys that blended well and played their role well in that team that got them to the finals, but then they cut those guys loose to try to form a super team. KD, Booker, and Bradley Beal, and it didn't work out. But also, now that I think about it, it's also part owners using cop-outs for their little super teams not working. That's, like I said, the Lakers with that whole Russ super team failing didn't work. Now you see the Suns with their big three hasn't worked. What have they done? Fire their coaches. So I'm starting to also see another reason this is happening is it's organizational cop-out and deflection of finding a scapegoat when the front office, tries to go and make a big move to push for a championship run, and it doesn't work out. So the point I'm getting is I've identified numerous reasons why this NBA coaching carousel is happening with all these different coaches getting fired. Some of the reasons are you have to please their top players. See LeBron James, for example. Could see the Bucks with Giannis and Dame letting Adrian Griffin go despite the team's success. You can also look at owners being greedy, being impatient, wanting to win a championship right away. If things don't go their way a couple straight years, nope, we got to move on. Like the Knicks just did with Dolman. And I can also attribute it as well to organizations copping out for their own decision making, trying to use the coach as a scapegoat for dumb player transactions, such as dumb trades, etc. So those are the main three reasons. And like I said, you look at the results of the coaching carousels, it doesn't work out. You could have one coach whose style blends well with a team, and then you bring in a whole new coach. It doesn't work the same. That's another problem with the coaching carousel. And when you keep going through coaches every single season, how are your players supposed to have someone to get used to? Like in the case of the Phoenix Suns, how are Devin Booker and Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant supposed to get used to someone if you're bringing in a different coach each season? That's not a successful recipe for success, because then you bring in, they start a season with a new coach. They try to get used to the coach's style. And then before they have the chance to get used to it, boom, coach is fired. Now they got to try to learn a whole new coaching philosophy to play under. This is not the way you build camaraderie to build long-term success. And I think about it. While the NBA, it's good that we're getting parity from year to year with different teams getting in the finals. The one con to it, I just thought about, part of the reason it's happening is because teams switch coaches and trade players so frequently. You can't really build a contender for. You have at best a 2 to 3 year window to contend nowadays. On one hand, it does play a role in there being more parity in the league. On the other hand, it's not good for team camaraderie. It's not good in the long haul. There's so many different reasons results play out with some of the examples I gave. Constantly switching coaches is not working out. And the coaching carousel is, as the title says, it's ludicrous and it's ridiculous. So ultimately, I'll leave it on this final note. The NBA coaching carousel is hurtful to teams in the long term because you never really have the opportunity for players to get used to a certain coach being there, which makes it harder for the team to build chemistry. 1 year, you're trying to get used to one coach. Year 2, you're trying to get used to another coach. How do you build a formula that works to build a championship roster that way? Doesn't work. And for the coaches, you're accepting these jobs. In the back of your mind, you got to be walking around eggshells. That's not a good culture for a coach to succeed and feel comfortable with their work and do their best job if in the back of their mind they're worried they're going to get fired at any moment. So that's not good for bringing in coaches, giving them the platform to succeed psychologically. And that's not good right there. And for some owners that just keep firing coaches after they make dumb trades, it's not going to help them learn from their mistakes. So overall, the coaching carousel is bad for organizations that do it. Instead of sticking with a consistent coach, they switch it up every year or 2 to 3 years, and it's not good for the organizations. It's just a greedy mentality by the owners. It's terrible. It's working out bad for organizations in the long term. And that's the biggest con of today's NBA product. So I'll leave it at that on my final note. To everyone that watched, thanks for watching, whether you caught me live or you watched on the replay. I hope you enjoyed, whether it was for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or even the whole 20 minutes. Thanks for your support. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your night or day. Until next time, it's your boy Nicky Stees signing off.